Alright mates, how's it going? It's that British guy that says S's annoyingly again. In today's video, episode 2 of Day of the Dragon by Richard A. Knack. Farisa and Rhonin meet for the first time, and I guess I'm doing a rom-com again. Let's go! Farisa Windrunner did not like waiting. Most people assumed that elves had endless patience, what with them being so long-lived and virtuous. But that was a load of bollocks, at least for younger elves anyway. They were pretty much just as impatient as humans, and Farisa had now been waiting 3 bloody days for this frickin' wizard that she was expected to escort. Didn't help that she'd only been a full ranger for a year, and this was her first major assignment, to play nursemaid to some doddering old fart. 1 more hour. If he's not here in 1 more hour, then sod this. Meh. What would have seemed to most people as a completely normal horse grunt immediately set Farisa on alert, scanning her surroundings. Her mount didn't make that sound unless trouble was afoot, but she certainly couldn't see anyone. The woods seemed quiet, peaceful. Meh. Farisa glared at the horse, about to reprimand it for pissing about playing silly buggers, when suddenly... You would be Farisa Windrunner, I presume. Within seconds, the stranger had the pointy end of an arrow at his throat. If Farisa chose to let it loose, it would no doubt shoot directly through, but for some reason, he seemed unimpressed. Farisa then looked the bloke up and down. Not an entirely unpleasant task, she had to admit. Was this the wizard she'd been waiting for? That would certainly explain her mount's peculiar actions, and her inability to sense his presence. You are Rhonin. Not what you were expecting. All they said was wizard. Well, all they told me was elven ranger. So I suppose we find ourselves even in this matter. Not quite. I've been waiting here for 3 days. It couldn't be helped. Preparations needed to be made. I had to procure a number of important items and supplies. Great. So this human was like all the other ones then. Cared nothing for anyone but himself. How the hell did the Alliance ever triumph over the Horde, Farisa thought, with so many like this Rhonin in their ranks? Well, if you wish to make your passage to Khazmodan, then it would be best if we left immediately. Farisa then peered behind the wizard. Where is your mount? She half expected him to reply that he didn't need a mount, and that he'd used his formidable powers to float here on a tiny cloud or some shit. Tied near a trough by the inn, so we can drink some water. I've already ridden long today, milady. Farisa might have been flattered by the milady if it weren't so jam-packed full of sarcasm. This guy was irritating, but it wasn't worth getting into an argument before they'd even set off. So she turned to her horse and started to prep it for the journey. My horse could do with a few more minutes rest, and so could I. You'll learn to sleep in the saddle quick enough, and the pace I set at first will enable your steed to recoup. We've already waited far too long. There are very few ships endeared to the idea of sailing to Khazmodan simply for a wizard on observation duty. If we do not reach port soon, they may well have had a bit too long to think about it and change their minds. Thankfully, Rhonin didn't argue, although he did frown, but he then turned, made his way back to the inn, leaving Farisa alone for a few moments with her thoughts. And she did indeed have a few thoughts. Firstly, she hoped she'd managed to escort this wizard bloke all the way to his destination without murdering him. And secondly, she wondered about his mission. Khazmodan remained a threat, that was true enough, but the Alliance had plenty of people capable of observing a place, people that weren't quite so arrogant. The fact that the Kirin Tor had sent this ticking time bomb of a guy suggested that there was more to this mission than they were letting on. However, Farisa very quickly shrugged those thoughts away. All she had to do was deliver Rhonin to a ship. Then she could be on her way. This wasn't her concern. The two then journeyed for about 4 days, mostly in silence, right up until Rhonin leaned forward in his saddle and said, Are we nearly there yet? 3 more days at least. But don't worry, our pace will now get us to the port on time. And Rhonin leaned back again. So much for that conversation. The only thing worse than travelling with an elf, Rhonin thought, would be travelling with a paladin. Or worse still, an elf and a paladin. God, that would be a mage's worst nightmare. The red-haired wizard then noticed that the sun was beginning to sink among the treetops. Great. He'd been hoping they'd reach the edge of the woods before dark, but apparently that wasn't going to happen. And if that wasn't bad enough, there was then a brief rumble of thunder. Bit odd, he thought. There's not a cloud in the sky. Did you just hear A second more menacing rumble then sounded, and without warning, Farisa leapt from her saddle, collided with the wizard and caused them both to tumble to the ground. Keep down. Don't move. But Rhonin didn't listen. He twisted around so that he could see above, and watched in horror as a dragon, the colour of raging fire, consumed not only his horse, but also all of his carefully chosen supplies. The ones he'd spent 3 days gathering, that were of utmost importance to his entire mission. A figure, grotesque and green, sat atop the Leviathan's back, then pointed at Rhonin, and the beast followed its master's instructions, opening its maw wide and diving directly towards its prey. Meanwhile,
I thank you again for your time, Your Majesty. Perhaps we can yet keep this crisis from tearing your good work asunder. If so, Lordaeron and the Alliance will have much to thank you for, Lord Prester. It's only because of your work that I feel Goneus and Stormguard may yet see reason.
For a young noble that no one had even heard of 5 years ago, Lord Prester had made quite a reputation for himself. He was charming, had a quick mind, full of the best advice. Tyrannus absolutely bloody adored him. So much so that he was seriously considering giving the bloke Alterac. That would be the best outcome for everyone, surely.
You've much to be proud of, Prester, and much to be rewarded for. I'll not soon forget your part in all this, believe me.
The young noble smiled, saluted, and then buggered off, leaving Tyrannus to think further about how great he was. The King of Lordaeron even spent a few moments wishing his own son could be more like Prester, before another idea popped in his head. His daughter, Kalia. She was still a bit young, but in a few more years he could strengthen his friendship with the Lord even further by offering her hand to him in marriage. Bloody great idea that was. But enough about how much Tyrannus loves Lord Prester. Lord Prester entered the chalet gifted to him by King Tyrannus, and he was absolutely beaming.
Look at the smile on your face. Did someone die a grisly, horrible death, oh venomous one?
Spare me your witticisms, Krill.
Most humble apologies, oh Prince of Duplicity.
There was a hint of mischief and madness in Krill's voice, which wasn't surprising, considering he was a goblin.
Still, I suppose there is somewhat of a reason to celebrate.
Celebrate, oh Master of Deceit?
Yes.
Prester's eyes then fixed on the goblin, who suddenly lost his smile and all semblance of mockery.
I'm sure you'd be willing to do anything to be around to join in with those celebrations. Wouldn't you, Krill?
Yes, oh Master of Secrets and sinister plots and stuff.
Then stop talking like a wanker.
Yeah, alright.
The very disturbing smile then returned to Prester's face.
Good. You are very likely looking at the next King of Alterac.
Fair play. All hail His Royal Majesty King Death.
Another goblin then rushed over, interrupting their conversation as it whispered something to Krill.
What is it?
It's your lucky day, Master.
What is it?
Well, someone is attempting to free Alexstrasza.
Prester stared, for so long that Krill could feel his whole body physically start to shrivel. But the tall dark figure before him then burst out laughing.
Perfect. So perfect. And they call me mad.